The first time Captain Elias Voss saw the alien queen, it wasn't in a war room or on a battlefield. It was through the cracked viewport of his damaged fighter craft, floating helplessly in the void between stars. His oxygen reserves were dwindling, and every breath felt like drawing needles into his lungs. The ship's emergency systems had failed hours ago, leaving him adrift in silence, watching the distant glow of an unfamiliar sun. He had accepted his fate by then, resigning himself to the cold embrace of space. But then, she appeared. Her vessel emerged from nothingness, a massive organic construct that seemed more alive than machine. It pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, shifting colors like oil slicks under sunlight. The craft moved without propulsion as humans understood it, gliding across the darkness with unnatural grace. When its outer membrane parted to reveal her throne chamber, Elias wondered if he was hallucinating. Starvation and lack of oxygen could make one see impossible things, or so he thought at first. She descended toward him, suspended within a translucent cocoon of energy. Her form was both beautiful and alien, elongated limbs wrapped in iridescent scales, eyes too large for any human face reflecting light like polished obsidian. A crown-like structure adorned her head, pulsating faintly with veins of golden light. She exuded power, not just physical but something deeper, primal. Every instinct screamed at Elias to fight or flee, yet he couldn't move. He was pinned beneath her gaze, unable to look away even as fear coiled around his chest. "You are dying," she said, her voice resonating not just in his ears but inside his mind. It wasn't telepathy exactly. It was as though the words materialized directly in his thoughts, bypassing language entirely. "Why do you resist?" Elias struggled to speak, his parched throat refusing to cooperate. Finally, he managed a hoarse whisper. Because I'm supposed to." Her expression shifted ever so slightly. What might have been amusement crossed her features. She raised a slender hand, and suddenly, Elias found himself enveloped in warmth. His failing body surged with renewed strength as oxygen flooded his system. Pain receded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of calm. For a moment, he forgot where he was, forgot everything except the presence before him. "Your species is fascinating," she continued, tilting her head as though studying a curious specimen. "So fragile, yet capable of such resilience. Tell me, soldier, what drives you? What makes you cling to life when all hope seems lost?" Elias hesitated, unsure how to answer. How could he explain humanity's stubborn refusal to give up, even when faced with insurmountable odds? How could he articulate the fire burning in their hearts, the unyielding belief that tomorrow would always be better than today? "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Maybe we're just too stupid to quit." To his surprise, she laughed, a sound like wind chimes ringing out in an empty cathedral. "Stupidity does not create civilizations. Nor does it build ships to traverse the stars. No, there is something else in your kind, something rare. Something worth preserving." Before Elias could respond, the cocoon surrounding him dissolved, and he floated weightlessly beside her throne. The alien queen gestured toward a holographic display hovering nearby. Images flickered across its surface, scenes of Earth, captured from orbit. Cities sprawling across continents, oceans teeming with life, forests stretching endlessly beneath skies painted with dawn's first light. It was breathtaking, humbling even, to see his home world through another's eyes. "Tell me about this place," she commanded softly. "This cradle of your existence." And so, Elias began to speak, not as a soldier reporting to a superior, but as a man sharing pieces of himself. He spoke of Earth's beauty and chaos, its triumphs and failures. He told her stories of love and loss, of dreams pursued and shattered. As he talked, he realized she wasn't merely listening. She was absorbing every word, every emotion behind them. Her eyes gleamed brighter with each passing moment, as though feeding on the essence of his words. When he finished, silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hum of her ship. Then, without warning, she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Captain Elias Voss," she said, pronouncing his name with perfect clarity, "you will serve a greater purpose than you can imagine. My daughter needs you." The statement hit Elias like a meteor strike. Confusion, disbelief, and a surge of protectiveness collided within him, leaving him momentarily speechless. "Your daughter," he echoed, his voice strained. "What do you mean? I'm a soldier, not some caretaker." The alien queen's luminous eyes narrowed fractionally, her expression unreadable yet emanating an intensity that made Elias feel as though he were being dissected layer by layer. "You misunderstand," she replied, her mental voice weaving through his thoughts like silken threads. "She requires not mere guardianship, but salvation. From forces beyond her control, and perhaps yours." Elias shook his head, struggling to process the enormity of her declaration. "I don't understand. Why me? There must be others more qualified, more prepared, to help her." A ripple of something akin to frustration passed over her features, subtle yet unmistakable. "Because you possess qualities uncommon among your kind," she explained, leaning back slightly. "Courage tempered by wisdom. Strength balanced by compassion. These attributes are rare, even among those who call themselves leaders." "But," Elias started, only to be cut off by a wave of her hand. The gesture silenced him instantly, as if an invisible force pressed against his vocal cords. "Do not mistake my request for charity," she continued, her tone sharpening. "This is no act of benevolence toward your species. My daughter carries within her the key to our survival, the survival of billions across countless worlds. Yet she stands on the precipice of destruction, caught between warring factions vying for dominion over the cosmos. If she falls, we all fall." Her words hung heavy in the air, each syllable laden with implications that sent shivers down Elias's spine. He clenched his fists, trying to steady himself against the tide of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Anger, fear, doubt, they swirled together into a tempest he barely recognized. "You're asking me to risk everything, for someone I've never met," he said, his voice low but tinged with defiance. "For a cause I don't fully understand." The alien queen regarded him silently for several heartbeats, her gaze piercing and unwavering. Then, slowly, she rose from her throne, her movements fluid and deliberate. She approached him until they stood mere inches apart, her towering form casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light around them. "You speak of risk," she murmured, her voice softer now but no less commanding. "Yet what greater risk exists than allowing despair to consume us all? You ask for understanding, but knowledge comes at a price, one you may not be willing to pay. Still, I offer you this choice: stand with us or stand aside. But know this, if you refuse, you condemn not only my child but also the future of your own kind." Elias swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the artificial atmosphere sustaining him. The weight of her words bore down upon him like gravity amplified tenfold. He wanted to argue, to demand answers, to reject the burden she sought to place upon his shoulders. Yet deep within him, a spark of determination flared to life, a stubborn refusal to yield to fear or uncertainty. "I need to meet her," he said finally, his voice steadier than he expected. "If I'm to do this, if I'm to help, you owe me that much." For the first time since their encounter began, the alien queen's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. A flicker of approval, or perhaps relief, crossed her features. "Very well," she conceded. "Come." Without waiting for his response, she turned and gestured toward a shimmering portal that materialized behind her throne. The gateway pulsed with vibrant hues, swirling like liquid rainbows caught in a cosmic breeze. Elias hesitated only briefly before following her lead, stepping through the threshold into a realm unlike anything he had ever imagined. As they traversed the ethereal corridor, memories of his past flashed unbidden before his eyes, faces of comrades lost in battle, promises made to loved ones left behind, moments of joy and sorrow etched indelibly into his soul. Each step forward felt like shedding layers of armor, exposing vulnerabilities he had long buried beneath duty and discipline. By the time they reached their destination, Elias knew one thing for certain: whatever awaited him beyond this point, there would be no turning back. The chamber they entered was unlike anything Elias had anticipated. Its walls shimmered with crystalline structures that refracted light into cascading rainbows, creating an ever-shifting tapestry of colors. At its center lay a circular platform surrounded by floating orbs of varying sizes, each emitting soft, rhythmic pulses of luminescence. The air vibrated with an otherworldly hum, resonating deep within his bones. And there, Seated upon a pedestal carved from what appeared to be living stone, sat the alien queen's daughter. She looked younger than Elias expected, though he realized age held little meaning here. Her features bore similarities to her mother's, the same elongated limbs, iridescent skin, but her eyes radiated innocence rather than authority. They locked onto Elias immediately, wide and filled with curiosity. Unlike her mother's commanding presence, she seemed almost fragile, delicate even. Yet there was something else in her gaze, an intelligence far older than her appearance suggested. "Elias Voss," the queen said, breaking the silence. "Meet my daughter, Leora." Leora inclined her head slightly, acknowledging him with a gesture both formal and hesitant. Her lips parted as though she intended to speak, but no sound emerged. Instead, a flood of sensations washed over Elias. Images, emotions, fragments of memory not his own. He staggered under their weight, clutching at the nearest orb for support. The visions blurred together, chaotic yet vivid, vast armies clashing beneath alien skies, planets consumed by fire, voices screaming in languages he couldn't comprehend. And amidst it all, a single thread of clarity, a desperate plea for help, whispered directly into his mind. "She has tried to warn us," the queen explained, her voice heavy with sorrow. "But her warnings go unheard. Those who should protect her seek only to exploit her gifts. Others dismiss her as weak, unworthy of leadership. Even now, forces gather to claim her power for themselves." Elias straightened, forcing himself to focus despite the lingering echoes of Leora's transmission. "What kind of power are we talking about?" he asked, his tone sharper than he intended. "How does she fit into all this?" The queen hesitated, exchanging a glance with her daughter before responding. "Leora possesses the ability to manipulate dimensional barriers, the boundaries between realities. This gift allows her to foresee events before they occur, to shape outcomes across multiple timelines. But such abilities come at great cost. Each vision drains her vitality, leaving her vulnerable. Worse still, prolonged use risks unraveling her very essence, scattering her consciousness across dimensions." Elias stared at Leora, his chest tightening with a mixture of awe and dread. To wield such power, and bear such responsibility, seemed unimaginable. Yet the vulnerability in her posture, the way she clutched the edges of her robe as if seeking comfort, reminded him painfully of someone much younger, much more fragile than her extraordinary gifts implied. "And these factions you mentioned," he pressed, turning back to the queen. "Who exactly are we dealing with?" Her expression darkened, shadows playing across her scaled features. "There are two primary threats. The first is the Consortium, a coalition of technologically advanced species driven by greed and ambition. They view Leora's abilities as tools to expand their dominion, regardless of the consequences. The second is the voidborn, ancient entities born from the remnants of collapsed universes. They feed on chaos and destruction, drawn to Leora's potential like moths to flame. Both seek to control her, neither cares whether she survives." Elias absorbed this information in stunned silence, his mind racing to grasp the scope of the conflict. It wasn't just about saving one life, it was about averting catastrophe on a scale he couldn't fully comprehend. And somehow, he was expected to play a pivotal role. "But why involve me?" he demanded, frustration creeping into his voice. "Surely you have warriors, strategists, people better equipped to handle this than a lone human soldier." The queen stepped closer, her piercing gaze locking onto his. "Because, Captain, you represent hope. Not just for Leora, but for everyone who opposes tyranny and annihilation. Your presence alone disrupts the balance these factions rely on. They see you as unpredictable, uncontrollable, a wild card they cannot anticipate. That unpredictability gives us an edge we desperately need." Elias opened his mouth to protest further, but the words died on his lips as Leora rose from her pedestal and approached him. Her movements were tentative, almost shy, yet there was a quiet resolve in her stance. She extended a trembling hand toward him, palm upward, as if offering something intangible. When Elias hesitated, she closed the distance between them, placing her hand gently against his chest. Instantly, another wave of sensations engulfed him, this time softer, warmer. Memories of laughter, of shared victories, of moments where fear gave way to courage. He saw flashes of himself standing alongside Leora, fighting side by side against impossible odds. The images weren't predictions or commands, they were possibilities, choices waiting to be made. Choices that hinged on his willingness to step into the unknown. "I understand your doubts," Leora said finally, her voice barely audible yet carrying immense weight. "But know this, you are not alone. Together, we can forge a path where none exists. Will you walk it with me?" Her question lingered in the air, heavy with expectation. Elias glanced at the queen, whose stern expression betrayed no hint of compromise, then back at Leora, whose eyes shimmered with quiet desperation. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine saying no, to envision walking away from this surreal nightmare and returning to the familiar confines of his old life. But the image felt hollow, incomplete. Deep down, he knew he couldn't, turn his back on the plea etched into every fiber of Leora's being. Taking a deep breath, Elias placed his hand over hers, sealing the unspoken pact. "All right," he said, his voice firm despite the turmoil raging inside him. "Let's do this." No sooner had Elias committed himself to aiding Leora than the chamber erupted in chaos. A deafening roar tore through the crystalline walls, sending shards of prismatic glass raining down like deadly confetti. The floating orbs around them flickered erratically, their soothing luminescence replaced by erratic bursts of crimson light. Before Elias could react, the ground beneath his feet trembled violently, nearly knocking him off balance. "They've found us!" the alien queen barked, her previously serene demeanor giving way to fierce urgency. She darted toward a console embedded in the wall, her fingers moving with practiced precision over glowing symbols that responded to her touch. Voidborn scouts, they must have traced Leora's resonance signature. Elias instinctively positioned himself between Leora and the source of the disturbance, his training kicking in despite the overwhelming strangeness of the situation. His eyes scanned the chamber for threats, but the enemy remained unseen, lurking beyond the fractured walls. The air grew thick with tension, charged with an energy that prickled against his skin. "Stay close to me," he shouted to Leora, who gripped the edge of her robe tightly, her earlier confidence crumbling under the weight of impending danger. Her wide eyes darted around the room, searching for escape routes or weapons, though neither offered much solace against foes born from collapsing universes. Suddenly, the shimmering portal they'd entered through expanded, distorting reality itself as shadowy tendrils snaked into the chamber. The tendrils coalesced into humanoid shapes, their forms shifting and writhing as if composed of liquid darkness. Their eyes glowed with malevolent red light, fixing on Leora with predatory intent. Elias counted 6 of them, though their numbers seemed to fluctuate unnaturally, as if testing the boundaries of perception. "Dimensional phantoms," the queen spat, her voice laced with venom. "They feed on instability. Kill them quickly, or they'll tear this place apart." Without hesitation, Elias lunged forward, closing the distance between himself and the nearest phantom. Drawing his combat knife from its holster, he slashed at the creature, only for the blade to pass harmlessly through its ephemeral form. The phantom retaliated with a swipe of its clawed hand, narrowly missing Elias's face but grazing his shoulder. Pain seared through him, sharp and electrifying, as if the attack had disrupted his very essence. "Physical weapons won't work," Leora cried out, her voice trembling but urgent. "You need to disrupt their connection to this plane." "How the hell do I do that?" Elias shouted back, dodging another strike while trying to formulate a plan. He glanced at the queen, who was furiously working the console, her efforts seemingly directed at reinforcing the chamber's structural integrity. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't helping them fight. "Focus your thoughts," Leora urged, her hands clasped together as if praying. "Imagine severing their ties to this dimension, cutting the strings that hold them here." Elias didn't have time to question her cryptic advice. Trusting his instincts, he planted his feet firmly on the ground and concentrated, visualizing the phantom before him unraveling like smoke dissipated by wind. To his astonishment, the creature faltered, its form flickering and destabilizing. Seizing the opportunity, Elias drove his fist into its chest, pouring every ounce of willpower into the blow. With an ear-splitting shriek, the phantom dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only a faint residue of ash. "One down!" he yelled, adrenaline surging through his veins. But the victory was short-lived. Two more phantoms converged on him simultaneously, forcing him to dive sideways to avoid being overwhelmed. He rolled to his feet, panting heavily, aware that brute force alone wouldn't win this fight. Meanwhile, Leora had taken matters into her own hands. Standing at the center of the platform, she raised her arms skyward, her iridescent skin glowing with an inner light. The remaining orbs around her pulsed in sync with her movements, amplifying her energy. A wave of force rippled outward, causing the phantoms to stagger as if buffeted by an invisible gale. One of them disintegrated entirely, unable to withstand the onslaught. "Keep going," the queen commanded, abandoning the console to join the fray. She produced a staff-like weapon from thin air, its tip crackling with arcs of golden lightning. With precise strikes, she dispatched another phantom, her movements fluid and calculated. Yet even with their combined efforts, the invaders showed no signs of retreat. Elias found himself face to face with the last phantom, its form larger and more menacing than the others. It loomed over him, its claws extended, ready to strike. Summoning every ounce of focus, he envisioned the creature unraveling once more, picturing its essence dispersing into the void from whence it came. As the phantom lunged, Elias sidestepped and delivered a spinning kick, channeling his mental energy into the blow. The phantom let out a final, agonized wail before collapsing into dust. For a brief moment, silence reigned. The chamber lay in ruins, its crystalline walls reduced to jagged fragments. The orbs floated listlessly, their lights dimmed. Exhaustion claimed Elias, his legs buckling beneath him as he sank to his knees. Leora stumbled toward him, her own strength visibly depleted, and knelt beside him. "We did it," she whispered, though her tone carried more relief than triumph. Her gaze met his, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You saved us." Before Elias could respond, the queen approached, her expression grim despite their narrow victory. "This is only the beginning," she warned. "The voidborn know where we are now. More will come, and next time, they won't send mere scouts." Leora nodded solemnly, rising to her feet with newfound determination. "Then we prepare," she declared, her voice stronger than before. "We train. We adapt. Because we have no other choice." Elias forced himself upright, meeting the gazes of both women, alien royalty bound by destiny and necessity. Despite the exhaustion weighing him down, a spark of resolve reignited within him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one truth with absolute certainty: they would face them together. The aftermath of the battle left Elias grappling with a cocktail of emotions that churned within him like storm-tossed seas. Relief at surviving the encounter warred with the gnawing realization that this skirmish was merely a prelude to far greater dangers. As he surveyed the wreckage of the chamber, shards of crystalline debris crunching underfoot, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stepped onto a stage far grander, and infinitely more perilous, than any battlefield he'd known. Leora's presence beside him was both comforting and unsettling. Her earlier fragility had transformed into steely resolve, yet Elias couldn't ignore the toll the confrontation had taken on her. Dark circles framed her luminous eyes, and her normally iridescent skin seemed duller, as though drained of vitality. When she caught him studying her, she offered a small smile that failed to mask her weariness. "You fought well," she said, her voice carrying a melodic quality that resonated deeply within him. "Better than most would have expected from someone like you." The hesitation in her words stung more than Elias cared to admit. "Someone like me?" he echoed, his tone sharper than intended. "You mean a primitive human?" "No," Leora replied quickly, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "That's not what I meant. I haven't encountered many who can adapt so quickly to situations beyond their comprehension. Most would have succumbed to panic or despair." Elias sighed, running a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. "Well, I've spent enough time staring down the barrel of impossible odds to know when panicking won't help. Besides, it's hard to stay scared when you're too busy trying not to die." His attempt at levity earned a genuine laugh from Leora, the sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. For a moment, the weight pressing down on them lifted, replaced by a fleeting sense of camaraderie. Yet the respite was short-lived. The alien queen's approach dispelled any illusion of normalcy, her expression as severe as ever. "We must discuss strategy," she announced, her voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. "The voidborn's interest in Leora has escalated faster than anticipated. They won't wait long before launching a full-scale assault." "Which means we need to move," Elias interjected, his military instincts taking over. "This location is compromised. We can't afford to stay here." "Precisely," the Queen agreed, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of reluctance. "There is a hidden sanctuary, an ancient refuge designed specifically for situations like this. However, reaching it will require traversing territories controlled by hostile factions." "Great," Elias muttered, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Just what we need, more enemies, more danger." Leora stepped closer, her expression earnest. "We'll manage. Together. You've already proven yourself capable of handling unexpected challenges." "Yeah, well, let's hope handling doesn't mean getting myself killed," Elias shot back, though the jest lacked conviction. The memory of facing those phantoms, their claws slicing through reality itself, was still fresh in his mind. He'd survived, yes, but luck had played as much a role as skill. As they began planning their departure, Elias found himself stealing glances at Leora. There was something about her that defied easy categorization. Despite her regal lineage and immense power, she carried herself with an authenticity that reminded him of soldiers he'd served with, those who wore their rank lightly, preferring action over posturing. Yet beneath that exterior lay a complexity that intrigued and intimidated him in equal measure. "She trusts you," the Queen remarked later, during a private moment while Leora rested in another part of the ship. "More than she should, perhaps." Elias frowned, unsure how to respond. "Trust isn't something I take lightly, especially not from someone in her position. But I get the feeling she doesn't have many people she can rely on." "Few indeed," the Queen admitted, her gaze softening slightly. "Her abilities isolate her, make her a target. She sees something in you, a potential ally, maybe even a friend. Don't disappoint her." The warning hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elias nodded slowly, absorbing the gravity of the Queen's words. Friendships forged in the crucible of war often proved fleeting, casualties of circumstance and conflicting loyalties. Yet the thought of letting Leora down stirred something protective within him, a desire to shield her from the harsh realities bearing down on them. Their preparations continued throughout the day, each decision weighed carefully against the backdrop of mounting threats. Supplies were gathered, defenses reinforced, escape routes mapped out in painstaking detail. Through it all, Elias found himself growing increasingly attuned to Leora's presence, her emotions bleeding into his consciousness like brushstrokes on a canvas. It was disorienting yet strangely comforting, as though their bond strengthened with every shared challenge. By nightfall, as they prepared to depart, Elias stood at the threshold of the ruined chamber, gazing out into the endless expanse of stars. Leora joined him, her silhouette outlined by the soft glow of distant galaxies. "Do you ever wonder why it had to be us?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible above the hum of the ship's engines. "Out of everyone, everywhere. Why were we chosen for this?" Elias considered her question, the weight of it settling heavily on his shoulders. "Maybe it's not about being chosen," he replied after a pause. "Maybe it's about choosing to step up, even when everything tells you to run the other way." Leora smiled faintly, her hand brushing against his. "Then I suppose we're exactly where we're meant to be." As the ship disengaged from its docking bay and slipped into the void, Elias felt a strange sense of inevitability wash over him. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: their journey was only beginning, and the stakes would continue to rise with each passing moment. The ship surged forward into the vast expanse of space, its engines humming with a quiet determination that mirrored the resolve growing within Elias. As they left behind the ruins of the chamber, and the lingering specter of the void-born scouts, Elias found himself reflecting on everything that had transpired since his encounter with the alien queen. What began as an impossible situation had evolved into something far greater. A mission not just to protect Leora, but to safeguard countless lives across dimensions. Leora stood beside him now, gazing out at the stars streaking past the viewport like rivers of light. Her presence was steadier than before, her earlier fragility replaced by a quiet strength born from necessity. Yet Elias could still sense the weight she carried. The burden of knowing her actions would ripple through realities beyond comprehension. He wanted to tell her it wasn't all on her shoulders, that he'd shoulder some of the load, but words felt inadequate in the face of such enormity. "We're running out of time," the alien queen said suddenly, breaking the silence. She approached them, her regal bearing undiminished despite the tension etched into her features. "The consortium has mobilized. They've allied themselves with rogue factions who see Leora's power as a weapon rather than a gift. If they find us first..." She didn't need to finish. The unspoken threat hung heavy between them, a shadow looming over their fragile alliance. Elias clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. For every step forward, it seemed two more obstacles emerged to block their path. Still, he refused to let despair take root. "Then we stay one step ahead," Elias said firmly, turning to face both women. "We adapt, improvise, and hit back harder when they least expect it. That's how you survive against overwhelming odds." The queen studied him for a moment, her obsidian eyes searching his face as though weighing his resolve. Finally she nodded, a curt, almost reluctant gesture of approval. "Your instincts are sound, human. But remember this, survival alone won't be enough. We must strike at the heart of their operations if we hope to end this conflict permanently." "And where exactly is that?" Elias asked, his tone laced with skepticism. "Some secret lair hidden in deep space? A fortress guarded by armies?" "In a manner of speaking," the queen replied cryptically, her lips curling into a faint smile. "But it is not a place you can reach with brute force or conventional tactics. It exists simultaneously across multiple planes of existence, a nexus point where the boundaries between dimensions converge." Elias blinked, struggling to process her explanation. "You're saying we have to fight in multiple dimensions at once?" "Precisely," Leora interjected, her voice carrying a note of grim certainty. "It's why my abilities are so crucial, and why they'll stop at nothing to control me. Whoever holds dominion over the Nexus controls the flow of reality itself." A chill ran down Elias's spine as the full scope of their task crystallized in his mind. This wasn't merely a battle for territory or resources, it was a war for the very fabric of existence. And somehow, he, a human soldier plucked from the brink of death, was expected to play a pivotal role in deciding its outcome. As the ship continued its journey toward the hidden sanctuary, Elias retreated to a quiet corner of the vessel, seeking solace in solitude. The hum of the engines provided a soothing backdrop as he replayed the events of the past hours in his mind. Each decision, each action, had brought him closer to a precipice he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Doubts gnawed at him, whispering insidious questions about whether he truly belonged here, whether he was capable of living up to the expectations placed upon him. But then he thought of Leora, the way she trusted him implicitly, even when trust came at great personal risk. He remembered the fierce determination in her eyes as she fought alongside him, refusing to yield despite the odds stacked against them. And he recalled the alien queen's parting words, "Survival alone won't be enough." Elias sighed, rubbing his temples as fatigue threatened to overwhelm him. Sleep eluded him, his mind racing with possibilities and contingencies. When Leora appeared beside him moments later, her soft footsteps barely audible against the metallic floor, he didn't turn to look at her immediately. Instead, he waited until she settled into the seat opposite him, her luminous gaze meeting his own. "You're worried," she stated simply, her tone devoid of judgment. "I'm always worried," Elias admitted with a wry smile. "Worry keeps me alive." "This isn't just worry," Leora countered gently. "It's doubt. You're questioning whether you're strong enough, smart enough, prepared enough to see this through." Elias hesitated, caught off guard by her perceptiveness. "Is it that obvious?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "But I feel it. Your emotions. They resonate with mine, sometimes more clearly than my own thoughts. I know what it's like to carry a burden you didn't ask for, to wonder if you're worthy of the role thrust upon you." Her words struck a chord deep within him, stirring memories of battles fought and comrades lost. "I don't want to fail you," he confessed quietly. "Not after everything you've done for me." Leora reached across the small gap between them, placing a hand over his. Her touch was warm, grounding, a reminder of the shared humanity, or perhaps sentience, that bound them together. "Failure isn't the end unless you let it define you," she said. "We'll face whatever comes next, not because we believe we're invincible, but because we refuse to give up." For the first time in what felt like days, Elias allowed himself to breathe deeply, letting her words sink in. The road ahead was fraught with danger, uncertainty, and unimaginable challenges. But as long as they stood side by side, refusing to yield to fear or despair, there was hope. When they finally arrived at the hidden sanctuary, a sprawling complex nestled within the heart of a dying star, Elias felt a renewed sense of purpose. The structure pulsed with ancient energy, its walls adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and shimmer under the dim light. Here, among relics of civilizations long forgotten, they would prepare for the final confrontation. As Leora led him deeper into the sanctuary, her movements guided by instinct and memory, Elias realized that their bond had grown stronger with each trial they faced. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, not as queen and soldier, but as equals united by a shared destiny. And so, as the cosmos stretched endlessly above them, Elias made a silent vow. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, he would stand by Leora's side until the very last breath. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing, it was about fighting for something greater than oneself.